Hello and welcome to another Ancient Warfare Answers podcast. I am Jasper Oorthuis. I'm the editor of Ancient Warfare magazine, and with me is Murray Dam. He's the assistant editor. And we're going to talk today about the Theban Band. Specifically, somebody has asked us, was the Theban Band trained to target officers? Murray, can you help us out there?
Well, yes, and I don't want to start by saying no, but the Theban Sacred Band, of course, were the elite 300 of the Theban, the revived Theban hegemony, which sort of comes about after they expel the Spartan garrison in 378, and then, of course, they become monumental part of the Theban success at the Battle of Leuctra, especially, and at the Battle of Mantinea, which is their sort of supremacy over the Spartans in 371 for Leuctra and 362 for Mantinea. And then, of course, they are destroyed to a man by the Macedonians at the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BC. So they've got a remarkably concise military history from
Curtailed.
Curtailed, yes. 378 to 338, basically. And there are, of course, other aspects of them which have got scholars hot under the collar, mainly that they were supposedly comprised of 150 pairs of homosexual lovers, and that they therefore were able to defeat any foe on the battlefield. There are other aspects to them which comes to this question, and that is, of course, that there are earlier precedents in Theban warfare for elite units being the front line of Theban formations, famously at the Battle of Delium. There's a unit called the Charioteers and Footmen. There's also some other battles that seem to involve Theban elites in the front ranks. And so when we come to the Theban Sacred Band, we've got 4 or 5 battles in which we know that they were involved. Not if we read Xenophon, however. If you read Xenophon's Hellenica or any of Xenophon's works, you will not find a single trace of the Theban Sacred Band. He does not mention them. So we're sunk in the sense that that's our most reliable historical source for the entire period that they exist, and yet it doesn't mention them. So we rely on Plutarch. We've got other sources in Athenian orators, later in stratagems by Polyaenus and others. So there's enough, and there's enough evidence to say that they existed. Diodorus also mentions a specially selected corps, but doesn't name them the Sacred Band. And in those battles where they fought, so especially in the Battle of Tegeira in 375, the Battle of Leuctra in 371, the Battle of Mantinea in 362, and of course the Battle of Chaeronea in 338, there's a very small subset of battles we can look at. They do seem to be the front rank of the Theban forces. At the Battle of Tegeira, that's the only infantry that Pelopidas has. He marches to Orchomenus and intending to free it from Spartan control, discovers that there's a Spartan garrison in place, so he retreats northwards to march around Lake Capace and comes across another Spartan garrison returning from Locris, and he therefore faces 2 Mora, so 1,200 Spartans with only 300 infantry, the Sacred Band, and 200 cavalry. And so what happens there is, just as will happen later at the Battle of Leuctra, the Theban Sacred Band draws up not in a single very thin line, but in a dense unit on the left-hand side, which is very unusual. Normally in ancient battles, of course, the position of honor is the right. And as we'll find at the Battle of Leuctra, what you find is that the Theban Sacred Band and the Theban forces in general draw up on the left, which is quite remarkable. One of the reasons to do this is to specifically target the Spartans, who on the opposing army will, of course, draw up on the right, as we'll find at the Battle of Leuctra. At the Battle of Tegeira, of course, there's only Spartans facing them, 2 more of them. And what we think happens is, of course, that the Spartan commanders, 2 polemarchs named Gorgolian and Theopompus, they probably are station themselves on the right. And we're told that Pelopidas charges straight at them and kills them in the fighting. And so there is this idea that you target the Spartans, you target the Spartan leadership, and thereby, by eliminating that leadership, you demoralize the remaining Spartans. And certainly at Tagara, that seems to be what happens. Theopompus and Gorgolion are killed. The Spartans open up a channel in the remaining forces, inviting the Thebans to continue on their way. The Thebans enter that channel that's been made for them and then continue killing the Spartans, and the Spartans flee from the battle. The advantage that the Battle of Tagara has is that not many people knew about it. It wasn't a public defeat, not a public shaming, like what was to happen at the Battle of Leuctra. So at the Battle of Leuctra, again, we have this amount of sources which gives us different information, but the short story is probably that the Theban Sacred Band makes up the front rank of the Boeotian and Theban hoplites, which according to Xenophon are 50 deep, which is a remarkable formation of Theban hoplites. Xenophon, of course, tells us that the remainder of the formation is half made up of baggage handlers and Boeotian hoplites who don't want to be there, which kind of makes them presumably ineffective as hoplites. But the other sources do talk about a dense and deep Theban column, which probably, going out on a limb here, is about 25 ranks in depth, which is the depth we get for the Battle of Delium. That's what Diodorus tells us. The Diodorus or Thucydides? Thucydides tells us for the Battle of Delium, and then other battles where they seem to have a deep formation that we're told about, even without a specific number. So anyway, the front rank of that is the Theban Sacred Band again, and again they are stationed on the left. They charge at the Spartans who are stationed on the enemy right. They do indeed target the Spartans and the leadership of the Spartans. In that case, it's King Cleomenes and his polemarchs around him, as well as the Hippaeus bodyguard. So they do indeed eventually kill Cleomenes, and the same thing happens. With the leadership eliminated, the Spartan division itself is demoralized. At the Battle of Leuctra, it does the thing that it's never done before, and it runs from the battlefield. All of the Spartan allies see this happen and they flee too. According to Xenophon, they get back to their camp and they say, no, let's re-enter the battlefield and fight again, which is probably a fiction. They've been defeated. They have fled the battlefield. They're not coming back. And so again, you've got this idea that the Theban Sacred Band are indeed at the forefront of a formation which has targeted the Spartan leadership. There are some other sources which talk about the formation of the Theban Sacred Band as a wedge, which is tricky to make a front rank of. At the Battle of Mantinea, which follows 9 years later in 362, you get Xenophon talking about the front rank of the Theban army. He, again, doesn't mention the Sacred Band, but he talks about the front line being led by Epaminondas. Epaminondas is the Lokagos, the commander of the Theban Sacred Band. He takes over after Pelopidas is killed. So him leading the front rank makes it him leading the Sacred Band in the front rank of the Thebans. And he talks about them being like the prows of triremes. So again, there's this idea, are they a wedge, or are they the forefront, acting like a ram into the Spartans? And again, they charge. Xenophon doesn't tell us that they're targeting the leadership in this case, because obviously Agesilaus, the Spartan king, survives the Battle of Mantinea. Diodorus, on the other hand, does tell us that Epaminondas leads them straight at the Spartan leadership. Unfortunately, Epaminondas is killed during the battle, and the Thebans are not able, even though they win, they're not able to take advantage of that battle. So again, you have a situation where it might have been something. Certainly not. They're not trained in any particular different way of fighting to target the leadership. They're not assassins or anything like that. It's a much larger battlefield strategy to target the Spartans, especially, and the leadership of the Spartans in the Spartan division. At the Battle of Chaironeia in 338, it seems that an answer to this question is no, they didn't, because of course Philip attacks the Athenians in the Battle of Chaironeia. We have the problem of the Battle of Chaironeia that we have very few reliable sources for it, or those sources that we have disagree with one another or don't say much. But it seems that Philip attacked the Athenians, and therefore the Theban Sacred Band doesn't get the opportunity to attack the leadership of the opposing force. And of course, famously, at the Battle of Chaironeia, Alexander, we presume Alexander, with the that division of the Macedonians, destroys the Theban Sacred Band to a man. And that, of course, the story reported by Plutarch is that when this was told to Philip, he wept at the deaths of such great men. So short answer is no, but there is a more complicated answer saying the way that Theban tactics were evolving during that 4th century, the Theban hoplites were concentrating on the Spartan division especially, and the Spartan leadership was stationed in the center of the Spartan division on the right wing. So by consequence of that, the Spartan leadership was in fact targeted.
Yeah, but it's about location in the deployment.
Yes, they unfortunately happen to be in the way.
Well, yeah.
I'm not sure. Look, I think there are a couple of other precedents. At the Battle of Haliartus in 395, the Spartan commander Lysander is targeted. He charges forward unsupported, and the Thebans inside Haliartus charge out and kill him, and so they realize then that the remainder of the Spartan forces are completely leaderless and they don't know what to do, and that seems to be similarly what Pelopidas does at the Battle of Tegeira. We get explicitly in Diodorus that he charges at Theopompus and Gorgolion, so that does seem to be a realization that if you eliminate the commanders of a Spartan division, the remainder of the Spartan force will actually be at a loss as to what to do. And that sort of, you can probably reverse that and say that when Spartan leadership survives, they continue to perform well. Even on Sphacteria, we find that the commander of the Spartan division has been killed, as has the next man in the command structure who would have taken over when Epitadas was killed. He's also dead, and it's almost there as an excuse that the reason that the Spartan hoplites on Sphacteria surrender is because they've lost their leadership, and they've lost the person to tell them what to do, which is a tricky one. You do get, again, you get the stories of Epaminondas, and talking about, was it Epaminondas or Iphicrates who talks about cutting off the head of a snake? Might be Iphicrates actually. And again, the Battle of Lechaeum in 391, you get that idea that you can eliminate a mora of Spartans with light armed troops alone. So yeah, the short answer is no, but the long answer is more complicated, as so often in ancient warfare.
Well, thank you for that, Murray. If you are interested in helping us out with these podcasts, you can support us at Patreon, www.patreon.com/Ancient Warfare Podcast, and see what kind of support you want to give us. That includes getting a subscription to the magazine right now. Thank you, and see you soon.